Guruve Gaura Chanjaya Radhikaya Tadaraye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tadabhaktaya Namo Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vaivacha Patitana Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Shri Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Dhanavat Pranam, devotees. So, I'm doing a short segment this morning on understanding various ways to look at verses of sastra. Of course, the verses of sastra in many cases are very self-evident, but like in Srimad Bhagavatam, it's clearly mentioned, Tulya Bhagavata Krishna Vibhusavasrai Prati Shloke Prati Akshare Nana Artakai. So Nana Artakai means there are unlimited meanings to be extracted from the verses, what to speak of the verses, even from each letter of Srimad Bhagavatam, so many meanings can be derived. If you look at the commentaries of our acharyas on Srimad Bhagavatam, even the very first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, they're really voluminous because there's so many insights that come even from one section of one verse in Sastra. So the discussion I wanted to have here is how sometimes a verse can be looked at according to various first stages of maturation of a devotee. One, according to mood of service. Two, and obviously and most importantly, the synthesis of the instructions or the insights given by Sri Guru, then by sadhus, meaning our Purva Acharyas and their commentaries, etc. Right? So these three sort of templates are to be used in how we analyze a particular verse. So let me give an example. I'm taking a verse from Bhagavad Gita. I'll take a verse, it's from the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and it's the 13th verse. It's a very famous verse. Dehi nosmin yata dehe komaram yovanam jara tata dehantara praptir diras tatra namuyati. So as the embodied soul continually passes in this body, from boyhood to youth to old age, similarly, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. So the translation follows pretty much directly the Sanskrit that's given, and the understanding is absolutely true. So now I just want to take the verse and I want to look at it from different angles of vision. So what do I mean by that? So in Sastra, there are different levels of understanding. My Guru Parapadma, Nityalila Pravishtom Vishnupada Paramhamsa Astotar Sata Sisimat, Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj, as well as our Purvacharyas have described that Sastra can be seen according to Samanyan Upakyan. So the word Samanya means general. How a general person looking at this verse would understand it. Guya means a more confidential meaning. And in a more confidential sense, what will the verse mean? Guyatar. Guyatar means even more confidential. Is there a deeper meaning to the verse? Guyatam. Even perhaps more of a deep meaning to the verse. And Sarva Guyatam. The most deep aspect of this verse in relation to the deepest conception. So again, let me repeat that. Samanyan Upakyan, a general view of a verse. Guya, a more confidential meaning of a verse. Guyatar, even more confidential meaning. Guyatam, very confidential meaning. And Sarva Guyatam, the most confidential meaning, means it's related to the highest possible conception. So if we took this verse and we looked at it from Samanyan Upakyan, it is saying that for any person, you can understand that the soul passes through various stages within the material body. From Kumara means from our boyhood, meaning from birth to our adolescence, so to speak, and Yovana means our youthful age, Jara means old age. Similarly, at the very end, at the end of our lives, the soul transfers along with the subtle body into a new body. So here it's saying that a person who is Dira will not be bewildered, Muyati, by understanding this is the process of material life. That there's birth, and then the body goes through various stages of existence, and finally, at the appropriate time, this body is finished, and the soul, along with the subtle body, moves into a new body. So this is one understanding, and it's an absolute fact and true. Guya, so let me go back. In Samanyan Upakyan, the person looking at this verse from that angle of vision may be looking at that verse only as a application of understanding life and their duties in life. They may or may not have a particular spiritual aspiration. They may not be involved in a spiritual practice. It is a universal principle of observation. This is what happens in life. And an insight into that observation is that here's the backdrop, or here's the reality of it. The soul is eternal. The body is temporary. The soul, encased in a material body, goes through various transitions related to that body, and at the time of death gives it up. Indication of the lesson here, the Upakyan, is that don't be bewildered by this. This is the natural course of life. So in Samanyan Upakyan, this is as much as may be desired or gleaned from the verse. Guya, a more confidential meaning, is for that person who has the motivation to try to understand the meaning of life, the understanding of what is the soul, how it is different from the body. So now this verse speaks to that person, affirming to them clearly that the soul is a separate reality. And if you're trying to understand the Atma or realize the Atma, now you can take shelter of this verse to understand, yes, the transitions of the material body are external to the soul. The soul itself is not changing, only the body is changing. And at the time of death, you can stay focused on your goal of obtaining Atma and Atma Gyan, and understand that this body is simply transitioning, and a new body will be acquired by karma, etc., etc. So, in short, a person who has interest in understanding the difference between the body and soul, because they're pursuing knowledge of the soul, this verse speaks to them in a different way than it does someone who simply is looking at the verse as part of their dharmic life. They have an interest in material life, perhaps, and just as dharma, they're reading Bhagavad Gita, and they've come to the conclusion, Bhagavad Gita says you can carry out your duty, understanding that the body is temporary and the soul is eternal. But they may not be actually pursuing that. The person who's doing Guya, a perspective on this verse, is actually looking at this verse for application in their practice to understand the Atma. Guyatar. In understanding spiritual life, there are various levels. One level is to try to understand the Atma and its difference from the material body. Another level of aspiration is to not only give up the material existence and obtain the Atma, but for the Atma to then taste bliss on the spiritual platform, which could be Brahmananda. Right? So in Guyatar, this first level of understanding of the nature of going beyond the Atma or Atmananda and trying to experience bliss beyond that, because Atma Ananda means an understanding that clearly the soul is different from the body, and the soul has no misery. Jiva Goswami Pada is written Chid Ananda Atmaka when he was defining what is the soul in Paramatma Sandarbha. But then he gave the commentary that this means that the soul is Dukkha Pratiyogita. So Dukkha Pratiyogita means there's no misery in the Atma. But the Atma may not necessarily be in a position to taste absolute spiritual bliss simply because it's realized that it's different from the material body. It has potential to do that. So by pursuing a deeper level of spirituality, then one raises to higher and higher levels of tasting bliss, whether it's Brahmananda or understanding the nature of the Antaryami super soul of Bhagavan, and then Sevananda, etc. So in Guyatar, the understanding is there that one is pursuing a deeper level of spiritual life. So they will then look at this verse from the aspect of how it nourishes their desire to progress further in the spiritual domain. Especially at this point, they may take up some kind of devotion towards Bhagavan, right? So let's say this is the first level of actually devotion or bhakti, right? In Guyatar. So this is bhakti in a general sense, that I recognize there's Bhagavan as the Antaryami, as Aishwaryamayi, Narayan, and I want to offer devotion to Narayan. So now I'm understanding that this material body is temporary and my soul passes through it, and I should stay dhira so that I can realize my spiritual identity in relation to Sri Narayan and taste the bliss of Seva Ananda. In the first three categories, that is Samanyanupakyan, in the pursuit of Gyan, to separate the soul from the body, and even in the early pursuits of bhakti, there is the hallmark quality of a predominance of self-interest. In the third stage, which is Guyatar, right? Samanyanupakyan Guyatar, the nature of self-interest starts to wane a little bit. So self-interest means I'm in pursuit of all of these things because I'm looking for my happiness, whether it's how to do my duty in the material world and get Dharma, Artha, Kam, and Moksha, right? Or whether it's to understand the nature of the Atma and taste the freedom from material miseries, or whether it is to take up the beginning process of bhakti, have the worship of God so that God will bless me and I will also become free from my miseries and serve Bhagavan and be happy. So still there is some self-interest involved in all three of these levels. In Guyatam, the more confidential meaning, the degree of self-interest becomes significantly less because there has been the epiphany that Bhagavan is not only my object of worship for my own self-interest, but is my object of worship in love and devotion in a deeper sense. So now that person starts to look at the verse not so much from their own self-interest, but from the perspective of looking at it as, how will I serve Bhagavan? Because this fourth level, which is Guyatam, means especially devotion, but devotion especially in Madhurjamayi mood, means in the mood of serving like in Braj, where there is no self-interest. Because the four types of liberation in Vaikuntha, some self-interest is present. Sailokya, Sarupya, Samipya, Sarsti, there's some self-interest there, that my happiness should be there. Shukya, Aishwarya, Uttara Bhakti, this is called by Rupa Goswami. I'm interested that I will go to Vaikuntha, I will serve Narayan, but I will also be happy. This is also something there in that mood. But when we start to consider the mood of Braj, then we start to think, Anya Abhilasita Sunya, I want to be void of any other desire except Anukulyena Krishna Anusilanam. All my endeavors, Chesta, should be towards Krishna being happy. So if we're looking now at the verse according to that mood, where there is the desire for the absence of any self-interest, and we simply want to serve Krishna, now the meaning will not take on so much relationship to ourselves. Remember in the beginning of our practice of bhakti, yes, because we will think, oh yes, in order to serve Krishna, I have to come to the platform of the soul. So this is an instruction on how to understand coming to the platform of the soul. But now on a deeper level, we're looking at the verse, we're looking what is Anukul Seva towards Krishna or Radha Krishna by this verse. So I hope everyone is following this idea. So in the maturation of our devotion, we will start to look at verses based on the more of the mood of not our self-interest, but the mood of the interest in Anukul Seva to our Ishtadev, Shishi Radha Krishna. So now I will take, looking at the overall perspective of this verse, that Krishna is now on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. He, after 10 years, roughly, he left Braj. And at the time of leaving Braj, there was a great deal of separation, a great deal of heartache and pain, and that Krishna himself, also suffering that great degree of heartache and pain, went to Mathura, and then later, under political intrigue, went to Dwarka, which is extremely far away from Vrindavan. So only messengers going back and forth was the only means of communication. So now both Krishna and the Brijabasis are suffering great pain in the mood of separation. So now my reading of this verse should be some way in which I'm looking at how I'm serving according to my desired aspiration in spiritual life. So let's take it that according to our line of conception, Manjari Bhav is the prominent feature of aspiration in this line, right? Not the only thing, but the prominent feature. So if I imagine that, and I'm not saying do this, I'm not saying apply your kalpana or imagination to things, I'm saying how to analyze and look at a verse to extract deeper meanings from it. So now, looking at this verse from the perspective of serving according to Sambandha Gyan given by my Guru, that I have aspirations to be a Palyadasi of Radhika, how would I look at this verse? So Krishna being on the battle of Kurukshetra, he's returning to the place that he last saw the Brijabasis after maybe 70 or 80 years of absence from Vrindavan. At that time, when Krishna comes now to Kurukshetra, and he pulls with Arjuna in his chariot, he looks at this place, and Krishna at this point has already told to Arjuna and to Duryodhana, I'm not going to fight, I'm not going to take up any weapons. Baladev Ji has traveled and started to go to various places of pilgrimage. Krishna has given his army over to Duryodhana. He has no interest whatsoever in the political intrigue and dynamics. What is Krishna thinking of as he pulls into the field of Kurukshetra? So I mentioned he thinks this is the last place during the Surya Grahana solar eclipse that I saw the Brijabasis. So do you think that that mood of Krishna's remembrance of his Brijabasis and seeing them here would not rise in his heart and become the dominant feature of his presence at Kurukshetra at this time? Our Param Gurudev, Nitya Lila Pravishtam Vishnupada Paramahansa Stotarasata Srimad Srila Acharya Keshavi Bhakti Pragan Keshu Goswami Maharaj wrote a wonderful article called Atmanivedan. And in that article, he quotes from the Gita Mahatmya. He quotes the verse, Sava Upanasado Gharvo Dukta Nandana Gopala Partha Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta Dukta Gita Amritam Mahat. This is a verse in the Gita Mahatmya which says that, O thoughtful devotees, please listen to the nectarian song of Bhagavan, which has arisen by taking the Vatsa means a calf, by taking Parata, which means Arjuna, as a calf and extracting from his own heart the nectarian song of this Bhagavad Gita. Who is the speaker of this Bhagavad Gita? Dugdha Nandana Gopala, the cowherd boy of Braj, Sri Krishna. So now, according to Tattvagata Vichar, many times we will say that the speaker of Bhagavad Gita is Vasudev Krishna. But here, in the Gita Mahatmya itself, quoted by Param Gurudev, he's saying the speaker of Bhagavad Gita is the milkman of Braj, Sri Krishna. Therefore, the verses spoken by Sri Krishna, these 700 verses spoken by Sri Krishna, have direct relationship to Krishna in his mood of Brajendra Nandan Sri Krishna. Not only they have meaning according to the other levels, Samanyanupakyan, Guya, which means the search for Atma Tattva, general conceptions of bhakti, but also related to Braja Bhakti. This is Guhyatam Katha. And then, even beyond that, Sava Guhyatam Katha, which means exclusively within Braj, the mood of Krishna's direct relationship to gopis. So, let me give an example of this same thing. That Krishna, when he sent Uddhava to Vrindavan, he told, Gacha Uddhava Somyam, Pitaro Priti Abaha, Mad Gopi Viyogadim, Mat Sandeshai Vimochaya. So when Krishna was feeling separation while he was in Mathura, he called Uddhava and said, oh, gentle Uddhava, I want you to go to Vrindavan. When you go to Vrindavan, two things you should do. One is you should give consolation from your own heart, everything. Two, Pitaro means like our parents. So he instilled in Uddhava that you should feel that Nanda Yashoda also like your own parents. Using your heart and taking the energy of my heart with you, you should show love to them and give them consolation in my absence. But he didn't tell Uddhava to do this for the gopis. He told him, Mad Gopi Viyogadim, Mat Sandeshaya Vimochaya. To give the gopis freedom from their suffering, give them my message. You understand? So he made a separation between giving general consultation to Brijabasis and separately giving special consoling to the gopis, which could only happen by Krishna's own direct message. So this is the difference between Guhyatam, meaning looking at a verse through the mood of Krishna's relationship with the general Brijabasis, and Krishna's special relationship with gopis. So, looking at it from the perspective of just Krishna thinking of Brijabasis, now at Kurukshetra that memory arises in his heart. And when that memory arises in his heart, Krishna using Arjuna in the same way you use a calf to milk a cow, bringing Arjuna into his presence in a very close way. I mean, in a spiritually emotional way. Of course, they're together on the chariot. Now, Krishna's mood that's in his heart also comes into the heart of Arjuna. Therefore, Arjuna goes to an apparent crisis at that time as to whether he should fight or not. If you're looking at it from this angle I'm speaking of now, right, which is Guhyatam Katha, that now that they've come into this Kurukshetra, Krishna's heart becomes overwhelmed by his remembrance of Brijabasis here. Arjuna being so close to Krishna, the bhav transferring from the heart of Krishna enters Arjuna's heart, but Arjuna digests this mood as a bewilderment. Oh, looking at my relatives, how can I fight with them? How can I carry out this war? Simply for material possessions would I do this? And this gives Krishna the reason now to speak his own heart in code and thought about his own separation in code, and at the same time apparently console Arjuna when Arjuna is under crisis about whether to fight or not. So this is a whole vision of looking at the verses of Bhagavad Gita in a different perspective. One, now the self-interest on our part is very much minimized. And we're looking at these verses as though we were having a mood of serving our Ishtadev, Shri Radha Krishna, at a time when they're experiencing great separation. So for instance, if you were to look at this verse and you were given the duty to be a messenger, right? And to come into the association of Srimati Radhika, and now you've read Hansadut of Rupa Goswami Pad, and how all of Radhika's Sakhis are trying to console Radhika when she's at Uddhav Kyari, in deep separation mood from Krishna after he's left Braj. And she's going through so much deep separation that her body is burning. And even when all of her Sakhis place very cool flowers and sandal paste and everything on her body, it simply burns up. This is how deep her Madanakya mood of separation is. The intensity of Mohan Bhav in Madanakya Bhav is so intense. And they're trying to console her. And Lalita goes to a lake to get water and sees a swan there. And she catharts to this swan all the deep moods of Radhika's separation, and wants this swan to take that message to Krishna and Dwarka. So this is going on. You're deputed as a messenger, and you come back, and your consolement to Radhika is, oh, dehinosmin yata dehe komanam yovanam jara tata dehantra prapta dirastatra. You're not this body. That's your consolement to Radhika. Do you think that that's very, very significant way of serving? From the point of view of Samanyan Upakyan, Guya Upakyan, and even Guyatam Upakyan, when we're beginning bhakti and we're establishing devotion, we want to realize we're not this body, our self-interest, this is applicable. But in the mood of the depth of bhajan seva, is this the message you would give to Radhika? Oh, this means you're not that body. So don't be bewildered by the idea that you're suffering. There's one sanchari bhav called mriti. Mriti means all the symptoms of death are about to take place. This happens in the deepest levels of separation. Right? So, but your answer would be, oh, you're not the body? So listen carefully. So if you're taking the message from Krishna, right, or a message is coming and you're going to interpret that message to Srimati Radhika in the mood of seva, as a Palyadasi, you're going to give this message to your Guru Rupa Sakhi, who will give this message to Rupa Manjari and pass it to Lalita, who will whisper this in the ear, or even Rupa Manjari herself, who will whisper in the ear of Krishna a message. What message would it be? Oh, Radhika, listen, Krishna sent one message here. Dehinosmin yatadehe komram yovanam jara. Oh, Radhika, we have spent so much time having so many pastimes during my various periods of age growth in Vrindavan. From the time I was a very small boy, and my mother bought me during your birth festival in Varsana. My parents came to the house of your parents, and climbing up onto your crib, your eyes had not opened, but upon looking into your crib, you opened your eyes and you first saw me there. All the way to at the time of my boyhood age, when I played with my cowherd boys, and so many pastimes took place with you also. When I begged for pearls, when I saw all of you girls decorating your cows and calves with pearls, and I asked and you denied me. And then I took some pearls from my mother and I grew my own field of pearls. So this is Mukta Charit. You understand? All the way to in my youthful age, Yovan, in my Kishore age, we had so many pastimes, including our Ras Lila. So, Radhika, remembering all these pastimes, now both of us in our deep moods of separation are feeling the effects of Jara or old age. Because one Sanchari Bhav that also comes at the time of separation is a kind of debilitation or debilitating feeling. Like example is that Shri Gadadhar Pandit, when he was serving Tota Gopinath, after the disappearance of Sriman Mahaprabhu, he became so overwhelmed with separation that he could hardly stand up to do the service of Tota Gopinath, so the deity sat down to accommodate his seva. So this feeling that now we've become overcome by Jara has come in the deep mood of our separation. Also, you can remember me in all of these ways. When I was Gopavesh, Venukara, Navakashore, Natabara, all of my Braj Lila, you should become absorbed in remembering those times. And though I know we're suffering the effects of our separation, which appear as old age, still, when you came to Kurukshetra and you met me here, also, you were very shocked to see Ai Dina Dayadranata Matura Nata Karvalokshaye, that formerly when you felt separation like this in Braj, I would always appear there. And when I would appear there before you, I would mitigate your suffering. And therefore you looked at me as Dinanath. That whenever you were Deen, suffering from separation, I would appear there and almost like the Lord of your life, I would mitigate your suffering and separation. But when you saw me here at Kurukshetra dressed in royal garments, at that time, your heart became even more broken. Because now you saw I did not have my Venu. I did not have my peacock feather. I did not have the mineral colorings on my body from Govardhan. but rather I was dressed in all opulence. So now your heart became even more broken. But I'm telling you, even though we've passed through these various stages, from when I perform my Leela in Braj to you're seeing me in Kurukshetra dressed in all these royal garments, you should understand that I have actually not changed. I am still your same beloved. Therefore, you should remain Dira. Dira statra namuyati. Don't be bewildered by having seen these things. Don't allow your separation mood to cause you so much pain. You should know that I am that same Krishna who had Leela with you through all of these various ages, and I am always with you, and you are always with me. So this message that Krishna spoke in a coded way to Arjuna is now taken to Braj as a message of consoling Radhika in her deep mood of separation. This way, we are serving the Katha of Bhagavad Gita according to what is absolutely pleasing to our objects of worship, Shri Radha and Krishna, with no self-interest that it means, oh, how I can understand I'm not this body. You understand? I'm not saying that this has to always be the interpretation. I'm saying this is one angle of vision of looking at any verses of sastra in the context of the overall mood of our aspiration for service and according to the Sambandha Gyan given by Sri Guru. You understand? So this is called Samanyanupakyan. Now Srila Gurudev has enumerated these things. Samanyanupakyan, Guya, Guyatar, Guyatam, and Sarva Guyatam. Just like similarly, Savadama Prityaja, Mamekam Saranam Braja, Aham Tam Savapapyabhyo, Mokshikshami Mahasucha. Our Srila Bhakti Rakshak Srila Goswami Maharaj, in his own commentary on Bhagavad Gita, he mentions in his verse, Savadama Parityaja, Mam Ekam Saranam Braja, that Krishna is telling Arjuna, oh, Arjuna, we should simply give all of these things up, any conceptions we had of so-called Dharma, and we should simply surrender to going to Braj. So this vision of looking at verses in this way is not something that is concocted or something that comes out of nowhere. It is born from the conception of our Guru Vargas and our Puravacharyas according to the mood of service to Sastra, not the mood of the study of Sastra to gain information for our self-interest. So don't misunderstand what I'm saying. We have to study Sastra to have concrete realization. So we have to take this verse, for instance, and make it applicable to the fact that we have to understand we're not these material bodies. Because how can you serve Radha Krishna if you have the abhiman of being the material body? So the verse in its Samanya Upakyan or even Guya Upakyan is applicable to us. But I'm just saying, also in our meditation, we could look at the verse in a higher degree, like Guyatam and Sava Guyatam, to nourish our bhajan life, how we want to serve. So to think Krishna is on the battlefield and he is having reminiscence of his meeting with the Brijabasis, especially the gopis whom he met with for 2 months there and gave them some consolement, but he was unable to return to Braj. So now coming back to this place, Krishna is having deep thoughts about this, and now Krishna using Arjuna, who's very close to him, because he tells Arjuna even in the 9th chapter, Raja Vijay Raja Guyam, I'm going to tell you the most secret of all secrets. So he's sharing with him the depth of his heart, his deep mood of separation from Brijabasis and gopis. If you want more praman for this, that Arjuna was the recipient of many conversations from Krishna like this, look in the 4th chapter of Adi Leela, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and there Srila Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami quotes verses from the Adi Puran, in which Krishna used to explain to Arjuna about his deep love for gopis. So here we have a praman that Krishna did on a continual basis, using Arjuna as a very close confidant, explained to him about his love for Brijabasis and especially for the gopis. Right? So I wanted to make this short video in order to give some understanding to various ways to look at verses and how those verses can be applied in a pragmatic way according to our adhikar, but also as nourishment or udipan for doing bhajan. which means that taking out any sense of self-interest and only applying the mood strictly of service to our objects of worship, Shri Satchidananda Gaurahari, Shri Radha Krishna Yugal. All right? So hopefully this was not a confusing explanation. If so, certainly maybe more mature, more senior Buddhists can give clarification, and also questions can be asked and we can try to give more clarity. So my Dandavat Pranam devotees, thank you so much as usual for allowing me to have at least virtual association. Dandavat. Vanchakalpaturubhyascha kripa sindhuvevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Radhe Radhe.